They didn't need me when I was kicked out on my 18th birthday. Not a dollar of support, not a single phone call to check in. But now they're knocking on my door like I'm some walking ATM, a $12,000 vacation, and they think I'll pay for it. After 18 years of silence, they suddenly remember I exist. Funny how money has a way of making people remember family, isn't it? Well, they're about to learn that some debts can never be repaid. My name is Rachel Monroe, and I learned what abandonment felt like at exactly 11:47 a.m. on my 18th birthday. I remember the time because I kept staring at the kitchen clock, waiting for someone to laugh and tell me this was all some sick joke. The birthday cake sat untouched on the counter, vanilla with cheap grocery store frosting that spelled out Happy 18th Rachel in crooked blue letters. Mom had made it the night before, and I'd actually thought it meant something. How naive I was. Rachel, sit down. Dad's voice cut through the silence like a blade. He was standing by the window, not even looking at me, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Mom sat at the table, picking at her fingernails, a nervous habit she'd had since I was little. My older brother Jake lounged in the doorway, arms crossed, wearing that smug expression I'd grown to hate. "We need to talk," Mom said, finally looking up. Her eyes were flat, emotionless, no warmth, no maternal love, just cold practicality. "You're 18 now, an adult." I nodded, thinking this was leading to some speech about responsibility or maybe college plans. I'd been working part-time at Murphy's Diner for months, saving every penny for community college. I had dreams, small ones, but dreams nonetheless. "That means we're no longer legally responsible for you," Dad continued, still facing the window. "We've done our job. 18 years of feeding you, clothing you, putting a roof over your head. That's more than a lot of kids get." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What are you saying?" "We're saying it's time for you to go," Jake chimed in, that cruel smile spreading across his face. "Today, the room's going to be converted into Dad's office anyway." I looked around the kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd eaten breakfast every morning for 18 years, where Mom had taught me to make scrambled eggs when I was 7, where we'd sat during thunderstorms because it was the safest room in the house. Everything looked exactly the same, but suddenly it felt foreign, hostile. But I'm starting college in the fall. I've been saving money, and I thought—" "You thought wrong," Mom interrupted. "We never promised to support you through college. That's your responsibility now. We raised you, fed you, kept you alive. Consider that our gift." Gift, the word tasted bitter in my mouth. "Where am I supposed to go?" My voice cracked, and I hated myself for it. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. "That's not our problem anymore," Dad said, finally turning around. His face was a mask of indifference. "You have that job at the diner. You've got some money saved. Figure it out. That's what adults do." I stood there in shock, waiting for someone to take it back, to say they were just trying to teach me a lesson about independence. But the silence stretched on, broken only by the tick of that damned clock. "You have until 6 p.m. to pack your things and leave," Mom said, standing up and smoothing down her skirt like she'd just discussed the weather. "We're going out to dinner tonight, just family." Just family. The words were a knife twisting in my chest. I climbed the stairs to my room on unsteady legs, my hands shaking as I pulled my old duffel bag from the closet. 18 years of life, and it all fit into one bag and 2 cardboard boxes. My clothes, a few books, the ceramic elephant Jake had given me for my 10th birthday, back when he still pretended to care. I packed it anyway, though I couldn't say why. The house was quiet as I carried my belongings to my car, a beat-up Honda Civic I'd bought with my diner money. It wasn't much, but it was mine, the only thing that was truly mine. As I loaded the last box into the trunk, Mom appeared on the front porch. For a moment, just a moment, I thought she might change her mind. Maybe she'd realize what they were doing was wrong. that you don't just throw away your own child like garbage. Instead, she tossed an envelope at my feet. "Your birth certificate and social security card," she said. "You'll need those for whatever you decide to do." I picked up the envelope with numb fingers. No hug goodbye. No, "we love you," or "call us when you get settled." Just paperwork, like I was being discharged from a hospital. "Mom," I whispered. One last desperate attempt. "Please." She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Regret, maybe, or guilt. But then Jake appeared behind her, and whatever softness had been there vanished. "Goodbye, Rachel," she said, and closed the door. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, staring at the house where I'd grown up, waiting for someone to come running out, to tell me this was all a mistake. But the windows remained dark. The door stayed closed. At 6:15 p.m., I drove away from the only home I'd ever known, with $237 in my wallet and nowhere to go. The cake was still sitting on the counter, untouched. My 18th birthday, the day I learned that blood doesn't always mean family, and family doesn't always mean love. That was the beginning of everything. The day I stopped being their daughter and became something else entirely, a survivor. The first night, I slept in my car in the parking lot of a 24-hour Walmart. The vinyl seats of the Honda cut into my back, and every sound made me jump. Footsteps on asphalt, car doors slamming, the distant hum of the highway. I'd brought a thin blanket from my room, but it did nothing against the October chill that seeped through the windows. By 3:30, I was shivering so hard, my teeth chattered. That's when I made my first real decision as an adult. I wasn't going to be a victim. The next morning, I walked into Murphy's Diner where I'd been working weekends and asked for full-time hours. Mrs. Murphy, a tough-as-nails woman in her 60s who'd been running the place since the Carter administration, took one look at my rumpled clothes and the bags under my eyes and knew something was wrong. "Family trouble?" she asked, refilling my coffee cup without being asked. "Something like that." I couldn't bring myself to say the words out loud yet. Saying them would make it real. "Can you work doubles? We need someone for the overnight shift, too." I nodded so fast I probably looked desperate, which I was. $7.50 an hour, plus tips. Overnight pays $8.25. You can start tonight. It wasn't much, but it was something. More importantly, it was mine, earned by my own hands, not handed down from people who saw me as an obligation. Finding a place to live was harder. My $237 wouldn't cover a security deposit anywhere decent, and my complete lack of rental history made landlords laugh in my face. After a week of sleeping in my car and washing my hair in the diner's bathroom sink, I found salvation in the most unlikely place, the community college bulletin board. "Roommate wanted," the handwritten note read. "Share studio apartment, $200 a month plus utilities, must be clean and quiet." The apartment was a converted garage behind a house in Cleveland's Tremont neighborhood. It wasn't much, 400 square feet, a kitchenette that barely qualified as a kitchen, and a bathroom so small you had to step outside to change your mind. But it had a roof, heat, and most importantly, it was mine for $200 a month. My roommate was Sandra Reeves, a nursing student at Cleveland State who worked nights at a 24-hour clinic. We were both too tired to be social, which suited us perfectly. We developed a system of polite nods and shared grocery bills, existing in parallel lives that occasionally intersected over instant coffee and leftover pizza. The first year was brutal. I worked the morning shift at Murphy's from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m., then caught 2 buses to Cleveland Community College for evening classes. I'd enrolled in basic courses, English composition, algebra, introduction to business, using the last of my savings and a small student loan that made my stomach turn every time I thought about the debt. My days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion. Coffee and ramen noodles became food groups. I learned to study with the sound of Sandra's television bleeding through the thin walls, to write essays on my laptop balanced on a TV tray, to calculate tips in my head while customers complained about their eggs being too runny. Some nights, lying on my air mattress in the dark, I'd think about my old room, the way morning light used to filter through the curtains Mom had sewn herself, the sound of Jake's music thumping through the walls, Dad making coffee at 6 of them sharp, the same routine for 18 years. But then I'd remember the coldness in their eyes, the finality in Mom's voice, and the anger would fuel me for another day. By year 2, things got marginally better. I'd proven myself at Murphy's, and Mrs. Murphy promoted me to assistant manager, which came with a 50-cent raise and the responsibility of opening the place 3 mornings a week. I moved into a slightly larger apartment, a 1-bedroom in Ohio City that cost $350 a month, but had an actual bedroom and a kitchen where I could stand upright. College became my obsession. Every paycheck, after rent and basic necessities, went toward tuition and books. I developed a system: buy textbooks used, sell them back immediately after finals, eat peanut butter sandwiches for lunch every day, walk instead of taking the bus whenever possible. Every penny mattered. The hardest part wasn't the money or the exhaustion, it was the isolation. My coworkers at Murphy's were friendly enough, but they were mostly teenagers living with their parents or older women with families of their own. My classmates talked about spring break trips and weekend parties I couldn't afford to attend even if I'd been invited. I existed in the spaces between other people's lives, observing but never quite belonging. Holidays were the worst. Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays, days when the rest of the world celebrated with family while I worked double shifts for the holiday pay. I learned to avoid social media during those times, tired of seeing other people's happy family photos, their complaints about annoying relatives and too much food, what I wouldn't have given for an annoying relative, for too much food, for someone who cared enough to ask how my day went. But slowly, steadily, I built something, not just a life, but a foundation. I finished my associate degree in 3 years, working full-time the entire way. The graduation ceremony was small, held in the college gymnasium on a rainy Thursday in May. I sat alone in the folding chair, wearing a cap and gown I'd rented with tip money, watching other families take pictures and cheer for their graduates. When they called my name, Rachel Monroe, Associate of Arts in Business, I stood and walked across that stage with my head high. Mrs. Murphy was there, sitting in the back row, and when I looked her way, she gave me a thumbs up and a smile that said more than any family photo ever could. After graduation, I used my degree and 3 years of management experience to land a job at Harper & Lane Consulting, a small firm that helped local businesses with marketing and operations. The pay was better, $12 an hour to start, and it felt like real work, the kind of work that mattered. 10 years passed like that, gradually, slowly, building a life that was entirely my own. I got promoted twice at Harper & Lane, moved into a decent apartment in Lakewood with hardwood floors and a view of Lake Erie. I bought furniture that wasn't from garage sales, learned to cook something other than ramen, started a small emergency fund that made me feel secure for the first time since I was 17. It wasn't the life I'd imagined at 18, full of family dinners and birthday calls and people who cared whether I made it home safely. But it was honest work, honest money, and most importantly, it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every dollar in my account, every small success, I'd earned it all myself. I learned to be proud of that, even when the loneliness threatened to swallow me whole. The silence became a living thing, feeding on itself year after year until it felt more natural than conversation. 18 years of it, to be exact. 18 years since I'd heard my mother's voice, since I'd gotten a birthday card with my father's awkward handwriting, since Jake had acknowledged my existence in any way that mattered. At first, I'd expected something. A phone call, maybe, after the initial shock wore off. Perhaps a letter explaining their decision, or even an apology. I'd imagined scenarios where they'd realize their mistake. Mom calling in tears, Dad showing up at my apartment with my childhood photos, Jake admitting he'd pushed them to kick me out because he was jealous of the attention I got. But the phone never rang. Not on my 19th birthday, When I spent the day serving coffee to strangers and pretending it didn't matter. Not when I graduated from community college, alone in that gymnasium while other families celebrated around me. Not when I got promoted at Harper & Lane, or when I moved into my first real apartment, or during any of the countless moments when I could have used someone who knew my middle name or remembered how I used to be afraid of thunderstorms. The first few years, I'd drive by the house sometimes, not stopping, never stopping, just slowing down as I passed the white Colonial on Maple Street where I'd grown up. I'd see Dad's car in the driveway, Mom's flower garden that she tended with religious devotion, Jake's old basketball hoop still hanging crooked above the garage door. The house looked exactly the same, as if removing me from it had required no structural changes whatsoever. Life had apparently continued seamlessly without me. I learned things in fragments, the way you learn about strangers, through mutual acquaintances, through overheard conversations at Murphy's Diner, through the social media accounts I'd search in weak moments before immediately closing the browser in disgust. Jake still lived at home, at 22, 25, 28. He'd gone to Ohio State, Dad's alma mater, on the family dime, changed majors 3 times, and graduated with a degree in communications that he'd never used. Last I'd heard, he was finding himself while working part-time at a sporting goods store and living in his childhood bedroom, the same bedroom that was right next to mine, where he'd thrown parties while I studied for finals, where he'd brought girls home and introduced them to our parents like he was some kind of prince. Mom had gone back to work at the library when Jake graduated high school, apparently needing something to fill her time. She'd posted pictures of herself at library fundraisers, smiling beside stacks of donated books, looking exactly like the kind of woman who'd volunteer to read to children on weekends, the model citizen, the devoted mother, the pillar of the community. Dad had gotten that promotion he'd been angling for when I was 17, district manager at the insurance company, corner office, company car. He'd apparently taken up golf and joined the Rotary Club, becoming one of those men who networked over 18 holes and thought their success was entirely self-made. They looked happy in their photos, prosperous, the kind of family that took vacation photos at Niagara Falls and posted them with captions like, "Making memories with my favorite people," pictures of birthday dinners at nice restaurants, Jake blowing out candles on cakes that looked professionally decorated, Christmas mornings in matching pajamas. Everyone gathered around a tree that was bigger and more elaborate than anything we'd had when I lived there. It was as if I'd been erased completely, photoshopped out of their family portrait with surgical precision. The hardest part wasn't the holidays or the birthdays. It was the ordinary moments when I wanted to share something with someone who'd known me before I became this harder, more independent version of myself. When I got my first apartment with a dishwasher and wanted to call someone who'd remember how I'd always complained about doing dishes by hand. When I saw a movie that reminded me of something we'd watched together when I was 12. When I walked past a bakery and smelled the exact combination of vanilla and cinnamon that Mom used to put in her coffee cake. Those moments would hit me like physical blows, sudden and devastating, reminding me that I was completely alone in a way that most people couldn't understand. It wasn't just that I didn't have family nearby, or that we'd had a falling out that might eventually be repaired. It was that I'd been deliberately, systematically cut away from the only people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I learned to fill the silence with other things. Work. Mostly. 60-hour weeks at Harper & Lane, taking on projects that other people didn't want, staying late to organize files that didn't really need organizing. I became the person colleagues called when they needed someone reliable, someone who wouldn't call in sick or leave early for family obligations because I didn't have any family obligations. I made acquaintances, people from work who'd invite me to happy hours, neighbors who'd nod hello in the hallway. But real friendship requires a level of vulnerability I'd learned was dangerous. How do you explain to someone that you haven't spoken to your family in 18 years? Not because of some dramatic fight or philosophical difference, but because they simply decided you weren't worth keeping. The few times I'd tried to explain, I'd seen the confusion in people's eyes, the way they tried to fill in blanks that would make the story make sense. But surely your mother calls sometimes. Or maybe they thought you needed space to grow up. Or the worst one, have you tried reaching out to them? As if I hadn't thought of that. As if I hadn't dialed their number 100 times in those first few years, hanging up before it could ring. As if I hadn't written letters I never sent, emails I never clicked send on, practiced conversations in my bathroom mirror for scenarios that would never happen. But pride is a strange thing. The longer the silence stretched, the more impossible it became to break it. What would I say? Hi, it's Rachel, your daughter that you threw away 18 years ago. Just wanted to chat. The absurdity of it grew with each passing year until the idea of contact became almost laughable. So I built my life in the spaces between other people's families. I worked through Thanksgivings and volunteered to cover Christmas shifts. I sent myself flowers on my birthday and learned to like the quiet. I became self-sufficient in a way that went beyond paying my own bills. I became emotionally self-sufficient too, turning inward until I was a closed system that required nothing from anyone. It wasn't happiness, exactly, but it was stability. It was a life where I controlled all the variables, where no one could decide I wasn't worth keeping because I'd never given them the chance to keep me in the first place. The silence had taught me to be small, to need little, to expect nothing. It had carved out pieces of me until I fit perfectly into a life designed for one. A life where no one could disappoint me because no one was invited close enough to try. 18 years of silence. It should have prepared me for anything. But I wasn't prepared for the day it finally broke. The call came on a Tuesday at 2:15 p.m., right in the middle of a client presentation about quarterly marketing strategies. I'd been explaining conversion rates to the owner of a local bakery chain when my phone buzzed against the conference table. Unknown number, Cleveland area code. I declined it and continued talking about social media engagement metrics. It buzzed again 5 minutes later. Same number. I apologized to my client, excused myself, and stepped into the hallway. Probably a telemarketer, or someone with the wrong number. I'd gotten good at handling those efficiently. Hello. Rachel, honey, is that you? The voice hit me like ice water in my veins. 20 years of distance collapsed in an instant, and I was 18 again, standing in that kitchen with the untouched birthday cake and the ticking clock. Mom. The word came out as barely a whisper. Oh my goodness. Yes, I wasn't sure this was still your number. You sound so different, so grown up. Her voice was exactly the same. That particular combination of forced cheerfulness and underlying tension that I remembered from childhood dinner conversations. How are you, sweetheart? We've been thinking about you so much lately. We, as if they were some kind of collective unit that had spent 18 years pondering my existence. I'm fine. My hand was shaking so badly I had to press the phone harder against my ear. How did you get this number? Oh, these internet search things. Jake found it online somewhere. He's gotten so good with computers. She laughed, that tinkling sound she'd always made when she was nervous. It took us a while to work up the courage to call. We weren't sure if you'd want to hear from us. The audacity of it nearly knocked me over. 18 years of complete silence. And now she was worried about my feelings. Rachel, are you still there, honey? Yeah, I'm here. I slumped against the wall, suddenly exhausted. I'm at work, so I can't really... Oh, of course. You always were such a hard worker. We're so proud of you. We heard you graduated from college and everything, and you have a real job now, in an office. We heard. From who had they been keeping tabs on me this whole time, collecting information about my life like I was some kind of case study? Who told you that? Oh, just, you know how Cleveland is. People talk. Mrs. Peterson from down the street. She mentioned seeing you at the grocery store looking all professional. And your old boss from that diner. What was her name? Murphy. She was at the church rummage sale last year and mentioned how well you'd done for yourself. Mrs. Murphy had never mentioned seeing my mother. But then again, why would she? What was she supposed to say? "Hey, Rachel, I saw the woman who abandoned you, and she asked about your life like she actually cared." Listen, sweetheart, I know this is probably a shock, hearing from us out of the blue like this, but we've been talking, your father and Jake and I, and we realized how much time has passed, how much we've missed. Missed. Past tense. As if missing me was something that had happened to them, rather than something they'd actively chosen. "Oh, we'd love to see you," she continued, her voice taking on that wheedling tone I remembered from when she wanted something. "Maybe we could meet for coffee, or you could come by the house. It looks exactly the same. You know, your room is still there, just like you left it." My room, the one they'd converted into Dad's office before I'd even finished packing. "I need to get back to work," I said, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. Of course. But Rachel, before you go, there's actually something we wanted to talk to you about, something exciting." And there it was, the real reason for the call, delivered with the same practiced casualness she'd used to ask me to clean my room or take out the trash. We're planning a family vacation, a real celebration. You know, it's been so long since we've all been together, and we thought it might be the perfect opportunity for all of us to reconnect. A vacation. The words tasted bitter. Yes, to the Bahamas. Can you believe it? 5 days at this gorgeous resort. We've been saving up for it for months. The pictures online look absolutely beautiful. White sand beaches, crystal clear water. One of those all-inclusive places where you don't have to worry about anything. She was talking faster now, excitement building in her voice like she was describing a vacation to someone who'd actually be going on it. "It's going to cost about $12,000 total, but we figured it's worth it for such a special occasion. A real family reunion. You know, just the 4 of us, like old times." Just the 4 of us, including me in their count as if the last 18 years had been some kind of minor inconvenience, a brief intermission before the family show resumed. "Mom, Now, I know 12,000 sounds like a lot, and believe me, it is for us. Dad's insurance isn't what it used to be, and Jake's still figuring out his career path. You know how it is with young people these days. But we thought, since you're doing so well for yourself, with your college degree and your office job, maybe you could help us out as a family." The hallway seemed to tilt around me. Through the conference room glass, I could see my client checking her watch, probably wondering where I'd gone. My colleagues were flipping through presentation materials, waiting for me to return and finish explaining why their bakery needed a stronger Instagram presence. "You want me to pay for your vacation?" Well, not pay for it exactly. Contribute to it. As a family, we're all contributing what we can, and we just thought, you've always been so independent, so successful. We're proud of that, you know. We always knew you'd do well for yourself. Always knew, as if they'd been cheering me on from the sidelines instead of shutting the door in my face. "I have to go," I said. "Oh, but Rachel, we haven't even talked about dates yet. We were thinking maybe next month, if that works for everyone's schedule. And we'd love to hear all about your life, catch up properly. It's been too long, sweetheart, far too long. Too long. 18 years, 3 months, and 16 days, to be exact. But who was counting? I'll call you back." "Wonderful, I'll give you my number. It's the same as it always was, actually. And Rachel, we really have missed you. We love you, honey. We never stopped loving you." The line went dead before I could respond, which was probably for the best because I had no idea what I would have said. I stood in that hallway for a full minute, staring at my phone, wondering if I'd imagined the entire conversation. But no, there it was in my call log, 18 minutes and 37 seconds of my mother's voice, as if she'd never been gone at all, as if 18 years of silence could be erased with one phone call and a family vacation I was expected to fund. When I walked back into the conference room, my client looked up expectantly. "Everything okay?" "Family emergency," I said, and realized it was the first time I'd used that phrase in 18 years. We finished the presentation. I made my recommendations about targeted social media campaigns, and I shook hands with a woman who would go home that night to her own family and probably never think twice about how lucky she was. But I couldn't stop thinking about my mother's voice, the casual way she'd asked for $12,000, as if I was some kind of ATM that had been temporarily out of order but was now ready to dispense cash on demand. As if 18 years of silence was just the price of admission to their family vacation. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and started making lists. Not grocery lists or work-to-do lists, but something I'd never done before, an inventory of everything I'd paid for alone while they'd forgotten I existed. The first list was education. Community college tuition, $8,400 over 3 years, paid in installments that sometimes meant choosing between textbooks and groceries. Student loan payments that I was still making, $26.50 automatically deducted from my checking account every month for the past 15 years. Books, supplies, lab fees, parking passes. I added it up 3 times because the number seemed impossible, $14,612. Jake's education, funded entirely by Mom and Dad, had cost them at least $40,000. I knew because he'd bragged about getting into Ohio State when we were still living under the same roof, and Dad had mentioned the tuition costs with the same pride he'd used to discuss a new car purchase. Jake had graduated debt-free while I was eating ramen noodles and working double shifts to avoid defaulting on loans. The second list was healthcare. Every doctor's visit I'd paid for out of pocket during the years I didn't have insurance. The emergency room visit when I'd gotten food poisoning from expired milk, $273 that took me 6 months to pay off. Dental cleanings, vision exams, the birth control pills I'd bought at full price because I couldn't afford to get pregnant and lose my job. I'd learned to treat my body like a machine that needed minimal maintenance, avoiding doctors unless I was literally dying. When Jake had broken his arm skateboarding at 22, Mom had posted pictures of herself sitting beside his hospital bed, looking like the devoted mother she'd always been to him. I'd seen the photos on Facebook before I'd finally blocked all of them, unable to stomach the performance anymore. List 3 was housing. Every security deposit, every month of rent, every utility bill I'd paid while they'd continued providing Jake with free room and board well into his 20s. I'd calculated it once out of curiosity. If I'd lived with them until I was 28 like Jake had, I would have saved over $60,000. Instead, I'd been paying my own way since the day I turned 18, learning to live on pasta and peanut butter, wearing the same 3 work outfits until they fell apart. But the fourth list was the hardest to quantify, the cost of doing everything alone. The Christmas Eve I'd spent in the emergency room with what turned out to be appendicitis, signing my own consent forms and calling a taxi home because I had no one to pick me up. The graduation ceremony where I'd sat by myself while other families took pictures and planned celebration dinners. The job interviews where they'd asked for references and I'd had to explain why none of them were family members. The birthdays I'd worked through because taking the day off would have meant losing tips I needed for rent. The nights I'd lain awake with fever, too sick to go to work but unable to afford missing a shift, wishing I had someone who could bring me soup or just sit with me until the fever broke. 26 years old, crying in my car after getting my first real promotion because I had no one to call with the good news. 29, assembling IKEA furniture alone in my new apartment, reading the instructions through tears of frustration because the pictures showed happy couples working together. 33, getting my wisdom teeth removed and walking home afterward because I couldn't afford the sedation that would have required someone to drive me. Every milestone celebrated alone, every crisis faced alone, every small victory and devastating failure experienced in complete isolation while they'd gathered around Jake for his every minor achievement. I found myself digging through old boxes I'd shoved in the back of my closet, pulling out fragments of evidence I'd kept without really knowing why. The hospital bracelet from my appendectomy, the program from my college graduation, pay stubs from Murphy's Diner showing $8 hourly wages and 40-hour weeks, bank statements from those first few years when my account balance never broke 3 digits. I had proof of everything, Not because I'd been planning for this moment, but because when you have no safety net, you keep every document that proves you exist, that proves you're making it on your own. My phone had been buzzing all evening. 3 missed calls from the same number Mom had called from, 2 voicemails I hadn't listened to yet, text messages that I could see previews of on my lock screen. Honey, I hope you're not upset about earlier. And we really would love to hear from you when you get a chance. At 11:45 p.m., I finally played the voicemails. The first one was Mom again, her voice honeyed with fake concern. Hi, sweetheart. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. I know our call today was probably overwhelming. It's been so long, but I hope you know how excited we all are to reconnect. Dad says hello. By the way, he's been talking about you all evening, wondering what you look like now, what you're interested in. We have so much catching up to do. Anyway, call me back when you get this. Love you. The second was different, shorter, more businesslike. Rachel, it's Mom again. I just wanted to clarify about the vacation. We're not asking you to pay for the whole thing. Of course. We just thought since you're doing so well, maybe you could contribute your share. $3,000 would cover your portion, which seems fair since you'd be getting the same beautiful room and meals as everyone else. We need to book by Friday to get the good rate, so if you could let us know by tomorrow, well, anyway, call me. We love you. $3,000. My share of a vacation I'd never agreed to take with people who'd spent 18 years pretending I didn't exist. I looked at my lists, at the evidence of a life built entirely without them, at the mathematical proof of just how much it had cost me to survive their abandonment. $3,000 was what I made in 6 weeks at Murphy's Diner when I was 18. It was more than I'd spent on food in my first year of independence. It was 2 months of rent in my first apartment, 3 months of student loan payments, the entire cost of my used Honda Civic. $3,000 was nothing to them, a vacation expense, a splurge, money they expected me to contribute as casually as splitting a dinner check. But $3,000 was everything to the 18-year-old girl they'd thrown away. It was the difference between making rent and sleeping in her car, between buying textbooks and dropping out of school, between eating and going hungry. I grabbed my phone and opened a new voice memo, my hands surprisingly steady. Let me tell you what $3,000 means to someone you abandoned, I said to the empty room, my voice clear and cold. Let me break down exactly what your love has cost me. By morning, I would have a different plan entirely. But that night, I sat surrounded by the evidence of 18 years of survival, finally understanding that some debts could never be forgiven, and some could never be repaid. The reckoning was coming, and it was going to cost them far more than $12,000. I called them at 8:30 sharp, right when I knew Dad would be having his first cup of coffee and reading the sports section. Some habits never change, and I was counting on their predictability. Mom answered on the second ring, her voice bright with manufactured enthusiasm. Rachel, oh honey, I'm so glad you called back. I was starting to worry. We need to talk. I cut her off. All of us. Today. There was a pause, then that nervous laugh. Well, of course, sweetheart. We'd love to talk. About the vacation. You mean, because we really do need to know by tomorrow if you're interested in joining us. Put me on speaker. I want everyone to hear this. Another pause. Longer this time. I heard muffled conversation in the background, then Dad's voice. Rachel, is that really you? His voice hit differently than Mom's had. Deeper, more cautious. The voice that used to read me bedtime stories and help me with math homework before I became an inconvenience to be discarded. Hi, Dad. Jake there too. Yeah, I'm here. Jake's voice, closer to the phone, still carrying that edge of smugness I remembered, but tempered now with something else. Uncertainty. Maybe. Good, because I have some questions, and I want answers from all of you. Of course. Honey, Mom jumped in. We're all here. We're all family. What do you want to know? Let's start with this vacation. $12,000 for the Bahamas. That's a lot of money for people who apparently can't afford it without my help. Well, yes, Dad said slowly. It's a stretch for us, but we thought it would be worth it. A chance to reconnect as a family. You know, make up for lost time. Lost time? I let the phrase hang in the air. Is that what we're calling it, lost time? Silence. Because I'm curious about something. In all this lost time, 18 years of it, did any of you ever wonder where I was sleeping, what I was eating, whether I was alive or dead? Rachel, that's not fair, Mom started. Not fair. My voice came out louder than I'd intended, sharp enough to cut glass. You want to talk about fair? Let me tell you what's not fair. 18 years old, kicked out with $237 in a bag of clothes, sleeping in my car in Walmart parking lots, working double shifts while going to school because I had no choice. We never said you couldn't come back, Jake interjected. You chose to stay away. The audacity of it nearly left me speechless. I chose to stay away from the people who told me I was no longer their responsibility, who closed the door in my face and went out to celebrate as a family without me. Now wait just a minute. Dad's voice, taking on that authoritative tone I remembered from childhood arguments. We raised you for 18 years. We fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head. We did our job as parents. Shh, your job? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. So parenting is just a job to you with a defined end date and no ongoing responsibilities. That's not what he meant, Mom said quickly. We've always cared about you, Rachel. We've always wondered how you were doing. Wondered, but never called. Cared, but never checked. Do you know what I did on my 19th birthday? Mom, I worked a 14-hour shift at Murphy's Diner because I needed the money. Do you know where I spent Christmas that year alone in a studio apartment eating cereal for dinner because I couldn't afford groceries? You could have called us, she said, her voice smaller now. Could I really? After you made it crystal clear that I was no longer your problem, after you told me it was time to figure it out on my own, like an adult. You did figure it out, Jake said. You're successful now. You have a good job, your own place. Mom said you even graduated from college. So, what's the problem? The problem, the casual dismissal of 18 years of struggle, as if my success somehow justified their abandonment. The problem, Jake, is that while I was figuring it out alone, you were living rent-free in my childhood bedroom. The problem is that while I was taking out student loans and eating ramen noodles, Mom and Dad paid for your entire college education. The problem is that while I was in the emergency room signing my own consent forms with appendicitis, you had a whole family rushing to your bedside when you broke your arm skateboarding. That's different, he started. How is it different? Because I'm a year younger than you, because I'm a girl, because I was easier to throw away. Nobody threw you away, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. Then what would you call it because I have a very clear memory of being told I had until 6 p.m. to pack my things and leave. I remember Mom closing the door in my face when I begged her to reconsider. I remember all of you going out to dinner that night. Just family, remember, while I sat in my car trying to figure out where I was going to sleep. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if they'd hung up. Finally, Mom spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. We thought it would be good for you to learn independence. Independence. I tasted the word like poison. Is that what Jake learned when you supported him until he was 28, when you paid his rent, his car payments, his credit card bills, when you welcomed him back home every time he quit a job or changed his mind about his future? That's not the same thing, Mom said weakly. You're right. It's not the same thing. Because Jake was your son who deserved support and second chances and family dinners on his birthday. And I was just an obligation you'd fulfilled, a responsibility you could check off your list and forget about. We never forgot about you, Dad said. Really? Then why hasn't my phone rung once in 18 years? Why didn't you know where I worked or where I lived or whether I was even alive until Jake looked me up online for this vacation you want me to fund? We wanted to respect your independence. Stop! My voice cracked like a whip. Stop lying to yourselves and stop lying to me. You didn't want to respect anything. You wanted me gone, and I was gone, and that was convenient for all of you, until now, until you need money. It's not about the money, Mom protested. Isn't it? Then let me ask you this: if I said I wanted to see you but couldn't contribute to the vacation, would you still want this reunion? If I said I was struggling financially, would you still be calling me sweetheart and talking about family? The silence was answer enough. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady and cold. I'm going to hang up now, and you're all going to think very carefully about whether you really want to have this conversation. Because if you do, if you really want to reconnect with the daughter you threw away, then we're going to do it honestly. We're going to talk about all of it. Every birthday you missed, every crisis you ignored, every year you pretended I didn't exist. Rachel, please, Mom started. And if what you really want is my money for your vacation, I continued, then you need to understand something: the 18-year-old girl you abandoned couldn't have given you $3,000. She barely had $3. But the woman you're talking to now, the one who survived everything you put her through, she could write you a check for $12,000 without blinking. I paused. Let that sink in. The question is, do you deserve it? I hung up before any of them could answer, my hands shaking not with fear, but with the fierce satisfaction of finally telling the truth. The real confrontation was just beginning. The plan crystallized in my mind with surgical precision. If they wanted to play family, we were going to play by my rules. And my first rule was transparency, something they'd avoided for 18 years. I started with documentation. Every voicemail, every text message, every piece of evidence I'd gathered the night before. I created a timeline on my laptop, a clean, professional presentation that laid out the facts with corporate efficiency. Dates, amounts, receipts. The kind of evidence that couldn't be argued with or explained away. Then I opened my contacts list and started making calls. Mrs. Peterson, this is Rachel Monroe from Maple Street. I used to live next door to you. Yes, that's right. I'm calling because I understand you've seen my mother recently, and she mentioned you'd asked about me. Mrs. Peterson, 73 years old in the neighborhood's unofficial information hub, was delighted to hear from me. She'd always been kind when I was growing up, the type of woman who made extra cookies and left them on doorsteps. She also couldn't keep a secret if her life depended on it. Oh, honey, yes, your mother was so proud when she talked about you at the church sale, said you'd graduated college and had a fancy office job, though I have to say, she seemed a little surprised when I mentioned seeing you around town, almost like she didn't know. Exactly what I'd suspected. They'd been collecting information about my life secondhand, treating my existence like neighborhood gossip rather than family news. Mrs. Peterson, I'm planning a little family reunion, and I wanted to make sure some old friends were included. Would you mind if I sent you an email with some details? The second call was to Mrs. Murphy. She was 81 now and had sold the diner 3 years ago, but we still exchanged Christmas cards. When I explained what I was planning, her response was immediate and fierce. Those bastards, she said, her voice sharp as broken glass. Pardon my French, honey, but I never could understand what they did to you. Finest young woman I ever hired, worked harder than kids twice your age, and they threw you away like garbage. Would you be willing to write that down officially? Honey, I'd testify in court if you needed me to. The third call was to my old landlord from the studio apartment, then to Dr. Stevens, who'd treated my appendicitis, then to Professor Williams from community college, who'd let me audit an extra course when I couldn't afford the full credit hours. By noon, I had testimonials, real people with real memories of the girl they'd abandoned and the woman I'd become despite them. People who'd witnessed my struggle while my family had been pretending I didn't exist. But the masterpiece was the email I crafted that afternoon. Subject: family reunion, the truth about Rachel Monroe. I wrote it like a press release, clean and factual. No emotion, no pleading, just documentation. I included photos, screenshots of the texts asking for vacation money, copies of my hospital bills from procedures I'd faced alone, images of my college graduation where the empty seats beside me told their own story. The recipient list was carefully curated every family friend I could remember, their church congregation, Dad's colleagues whose emails I found on his company website, the neighbors who'd watched me grow up, Jake's friends whose social media accounts weren't private. I even found the email for his current girlfriend, a sweet-looking teacher who probably had no idea she was dating someone from a family that threw away children. The message was simple. After 18 years of complete silence from my family, I received a phone call yesterday. My parents and brother, who haven't spoken to me since they kicked me out on my 18th birthday, have suddenly remembered I exist. They're planning a $12,000 vacation to the Bahamas and want me to contribute $3,000 as my share. Below, you'll find documentation of exactly what happened when I turned 18, along with evidence of the 18 years I've spent building a life completely alone while they supported my brother through college, career changes, and well into his 30s. I'm sharing this because my family has apparently been telling people they're proud of my success and that we've always been close. I want you to know the truth about what pride looks like in the Monroe family and what family means to them. I survived their abandonment. I built a successful life despite them, not because of them. And now that they need money, suddenly I'm family again. Some of you knew me as a child. Some of you watched me grow up. I want you to decide for yourselves whether the people who did this to an 18-year-old girl deserve to benefit from the woman she became. I attached everything, the timeline, the testimonials, the photos, the receipts. 18 years of evidence in one devastating email. At 4:30 p.m., I hit send to 47 people. The response was immediate. Mrs. Peterson called within 20 minutes, crying. Oh, honey, I had no idea. Your mother made it sound like you just moved away for work, like it was natural. She never said, I'm so sorry. Professor Williams emailed back within an hour. Rachel, I always wondered why such a bright, hard-working student never had family at any school events. This explains everything. You should be proud of what you've accomplished and ashamed of nothing. But the most satisfying response came from Jake's girlfriend, Amanda, a Facebook message that appeared on my screen at 6:45 p.m. Hi, Rachel. I'm Amanda, Jake's girlfriend. I just wanted you to know that after reading your email, I've been asking Jake some very hard questions about his family. He's been telling me for 2 years that he has a sister who lives across the country and that you all just don't talk much. I had no idea you lived 20 minutes away and that they'd treated you this way. I'm horrified, and I wanted you to know that not everyone believes their version of the story. You sound like an amazing woman, and I'm sorry for what they put you through. By 8 p.m., my phone was ringing constantly, but none of the calls were from my family. That was when I knew the silence was working. The same silence they'd used as a weapon against me for 18 years was now their enemy. While I was surrounded by the voices of people who actually cared about the truth, they were sitting in their perfect house, watching their carefully constructed image crumble one relationship at a time. The beautiful thing about truth is that it doesn't need defending. It just needs exposure. And I was just getting started. At 9:15 p.m., I sent one final message, a group text to all 3 of them. Hope you're enjoying your family dinner tonight. Tomorrow is your deadline for the vacation booking. Right. Just wanted you to know that by now, 47 people have learned the truth about our family dynamics, including Amanda, Jake's girlfriend, and several members of your church congregation. Still want to talk about that reunion? I'm available tomorrow at 2 p.m. at Grinders Cafe on West 25th. Come alone, or don't come at all. We're going to finish this conversation properly. Oh, and bring your checkbooks, because after 18 years, it's time to settle some debts. I turned off my phone and poured myself a glass of wine, the first alcohol I'd had in months. Tomorrow would be the reckoning, and for the first time in 18 years, I held all the cards. They arrived at Grinder's Cafe at exactly 2 p.m., looking like they were attending a funeral, which, in a way, they were, the funeral of their carefully constructed lies. Mom came in first, her face pale and drawn, followed by Dad with his shoulders hunched like he was bracing for impact. Jake brought up the rear, his usual swagger completely absent. They found me in the corner booth I'd specifically chosen, back to the wall, clear view of the entire cafe, nowhere for them to corner me or control the narrative. I'd been there since 1:30, nursing a black coffee and reviewing my notes one final time. The folder in front of me contained everything: bank statements, hospital bills, testimonials, screenshots of their texts, printed copies of the emails I'd sent, 18 years of evidence laid out in perfect chronological order. "Rachel," Mom said softly as they approached the table. Her voice was different now, smaller, uncertain, none of the fake brightness from our phone calls. "Sit," I said, not bothering with pleasantries. They arranged themselves across from me like defendants at trial. Dad kept checking his watch. Mom fidgeted with her purse strap, and Jake stared at his hands. The silence stretched until I could hear the espresso machine hissing in the background. Conversations from other tables. The normal sounds of people living normal lives with normal families. "So," I said finally, my voice calm and steady, 47 people now know the truth about our family. How's that working out for you?" "Rachel, please," Mom started. "This is embarrassing. People are calling, asking questions." "Embarrassing." I let the word hang in the air. "You're embarrassed that people know what you did to me." "We never meant for it to be permanent," Dad said quietly. We thought you'd come back when you were ready." "Come back?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Come back to what? The family that threw me away, the parents who changed the locks and converted my room into an office before I'd even unpacked my car. Jake shifted uncomfortably. "We didn't change the locks." "No, but you changed everything else, didn't you? Had family dinners without me, celebrated holidays without me, lived your lives as if I'd never existed, and now you want me to pay for your vacation like none of that happened." I opened the folder and pulled out a printed spreadsheet. "Let's talk numbers, since that's apparently the only language you understand. This is what it cost me to survive your abandonment." I slid the paper across the table. They leaned in to read it, and I watched their faces change as the reality hit them. $14,600 in education costs while Jake got his degree for free. $62,000 in housing costs while Jake lived rent-free until he was 28. $8,000 in medical expenses I paid alone, including the emergency appendectomy where I signed my own consent forms at 2 a.m. with no family to call. Mom's hand went to her throat. "We didn't know about the appendicitis." "Because you didn't want to know. You made it very clear that my health, my safety, my survival was no longer your concern." I pulled out another document. This is a letter from Mrs. Murphy, my boss at the diner. She describes finding me sleeping in my car in the parking lot during my first week of independence. She offered to let me sleep in the break room because she was worried I'd freeze to death. Dad's face had gone gray. "Rachel, we never intended." What did you intend?" I cut him off. "Because from where I'm sitting, you intended exactly what happened. You wanted me gone, and I was gone. Problem solved, until you needed something from me." I reached into the folder one more time and pulled out a check I'd written that morning. $12,000, made out to Monroe Family Vacation Fund. I placed it on the table between us. "There's your vacation money, all of it. $12,000 I can afford to lose because I spent 18 years learning to survive on my own." Their eyes widened, hope flickering across their faces for just a moment. Then I pulled out a lighter. But here's the thing about debt," I said, flicking the flame to life. "Sometimes the interest makes it impossible to repay." I held the check over the flame, watching their faces as the corner began to brown and curl. 18 years of birthdays you missed, 18 Christmases you ignored, 1 graduation you couldn't be bothered to attend. Countless nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering what I'd done wrong, why I wasn't worth keeping. The check caught fire properly now, flames eating away at their hopes. You can't pay that debt with apologies. You can't fix it with a family vacation. And you sure as hell can't erase it by pretending it never happened. I dropped the burning check into the ashtray, watching it turn to ash. I survived without you once. I built a life, a career, a sense of self-worth that had nothing to do with your approval or support. I don't need your family dinners or your fake reconciliation. Mom was crying now, tears streaming down her face. Rachel, please, we're sorry. We made a mistake. No, I said, standing up and closing the folder. You made a choice. You chose to throw away your daughter because it was convenient. You chose to support Jake through every failure while leaving me to face every challenge alone. You chose to pretend I didn't exist until you needed something from me. I slung my purse over my shoulder and looked down at them one last time. I hope you enjoy explaining to everyone why your daughter won't speak to you. I hope you remember this moment every time someone asks about your family. And I hope that $12,000 you can't afford burns a hole in your pocket for the rest of your lives. I walked toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and Jake Amanda seems like a nice girl. You might want to think about whether you want to turn out like our parents, or if you want to learn how to actually care about the people in your life. I left them sitting there in the wreckage of their expectations, surrounded by the ashes of money that couldn't buy forgiveness. Outside, the Cleveland sun was shining, and for the first time in 18 years, I felt completely free. No more wondering if they'd call. No more hoping for reconciliation. No more carrying the weight of their abandonment. I was done. They were done. And the life I'd built without them was more than enough. Some families are born, others are chosen, and some people are strong enough to be their own family when the one they were born into fails them. I'd been that strong for 18 years. I'd be that strong for 18 more. The debt was finally settled. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It means the world to me that you took the time to hear about this journey of survival and justice. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Are you at home, on your commute, maybe taking a break at work? Drop a comment below and let's connect. Please subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share your thoughts about family, forgiveness, and standing up for yourself. Your support keeps me going. Thank you again.